Okay, so good afternoon, all of you. In today's class, we are discussing the last chapter of the 11th standard, that is chemical control and the coordination chapter. So, in the previous chapter, neural control and coordination, we have seen that, and I already said it. Neural system and the chemical coordination system, they will work together to bring the homeostasis. In the previous class, we discussed very detailedly about the neural system. In today's class, we will go with this chemical coordinatory system. So you know that the chemical control and the coordination system, their mechanisms are depends on the hormones. So who is the main participant, or who is the one of the main uh, character in the chemical coordinatory system is nothing but the hormones. So you know that the hormones, they will work in the endocrine glands only. Hormones will be produced by endocrine glands. So you know already about what is endocrine glands. Endocrine glands, they will release their secretion directly into the blood. So let me tell again. So we have the hormones in the chemical coordination system. They are the most important participant in that chemical coordination system. This hormones will be produced by endocrine glands. The endocrine glands character or behavior only, they will release their secretion directly into the blood. So before we going into the further details, we have to define the hormones. What is a hormone? So hormone means it is a non-nutrient substance. So they are non-nutrient. So they will not be absorbed anywhere. So they are non-nutrient substance, and they will act as intercellular messengers. So they will act as the in between the cells, they will act as messengers and will be produced in trace amounts. Will be produced in trace amounts. Right. So listen. So what is the hormone? They are the non-nutrient chemical substances, act as the intercellular messengers, and produced in the trace amounts. Very trace amount, very small amount only we require this hormones. That's very important point you may have to remember. Now, if you look onto our body, so if you look onto our body, many parts of our body contains the endocrine glands. So you can see that many parts in our body will contain the endocrine glands. We'll discuss the each one. If you start from the top, the one of the main endocrine structures that will produce the hormone, it is called hypothalamus. So we will start with hypothalamus. So listen everyone, what I said, if you look on to the endocrine glands in the body, many endocrine glands in the body. For example, if you take the head region, that is the hypothalamus, pituitary, then coming down, you can see that the thyroid gland, thymus gland, then going inside the GIT region, there also will get many kind of inside the stomach hormonal production is there, inside the intestine hormonal production is there, then above the kidney, adrenal gland is there, the testis in the case of males, and the ovary in the case of females, they also will produce the hormones it is. So please understand that part also. So, but in the first part, we are discussing about this hypothalamus only. So hypothalamus, you know that it's the part of the diencephalon. So you know that the diencephalon means it includes the thalamus and the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is the part of the diencephalon only. So I will just draw the symbolic diagram of this particular hypothalamus. This is the hypothalamus, right? This hypothalamus will be having a stalk, and in that only the pituitary gland is present, right? So here two pituitary glands we have it. One is called anterior pituitary, other one we call it as posterior pituitary. So hypothalamus, they are connected with pituitary glands. Now, if you see the location, if you search the location for this pituitary gland, you will understand that pituitary gland is located in the sphenoid bone. So sphenoid bone is the bone of the cranial bone only. So for example, you just listen here. This is the one cranium. So in the center of this cranial region only, we have this sphenoid bone. So you can see that they have connected. So in the sphenoid bone, there is a cavity. In that cavity only, you can observe the pituitary gland. This cavity in the sphenoid bone, we call it as sella tussica. Right. So listen, everybody please listen. So what we learned. So we are talking about the hypothalamus. At the same time, I talk about the pituitary gland also because they are connected each other. Clear? So please understand, everybody please understand, this pituitary gland and the hypothalamus are connected. Now, what I said after that, pituitary gland, if you're looking, pituitary gland is located in the sphenoid bone. What is the sphenoid bone? Sphenoid bone is a cranial bone. In the sphenoid bone, you can observe a cavity, and that cavity we call it as sella tussica. So there only this pituitary gland is present. It's clear to everyone, no doubt. Now, moving on to the next. This hypothalamus, if you're looking, hypothalamus have the ability to produce hormones. How they got the ability to produce the hormones? How they will produce the hormones? Because inside the hypothalamus, if you're looking, you can see some nuclei, a specialized structure. What is that called? Nuclei. So inside the hypothalamus, what you can see it? Nuclei. So what is a nuclei? Do not be confused with the nucleus present in the cells. There, the DNA and all, it is present. It's not, should not be confused with that. This nucleus is different. Actually, the hypothalamus contain nucleus. They will produce the hormones. So what is the hypothalamic structure that will produce the hormones? It's called nucleus. But that nucleus is different from the cell nucleus. Remember that. Exactly what is this nucleus? You know about this. In the last class, we learned about it. A neuron will have three main parts: the dendrites, the cell body, and the axon. Clear? Now listen, everybody listen here. Many cell bodies, okay, they will be surrounded by axons. So cell bodies that will be surrounded by many axons, that structure we call it as nuclei. Okay, everybody please listen. Please understand, when one cell body or two cell bodies, they will be surrounded by many axons, and that structure we call it as nucleus. So let me write that. Cell body surrounded by axons called nucleus. Right? So nucleus, so that it's a cell body basically. So cell body will be surrounded by many axons. So basically nucleus is a gray matter. Remember that point. It's not a white matter, it's a gray matter. Clear? That is also clear. No doubt in that. Right. If you are very clear that, now what we have to learn next, we have to talk about the hypothalamic hormones. So this many parts, it's very clear. So we discuss about what is hormone, what is a hypothalamus, how they are connected with the pituitary gland, what is the location of the pituitary gland, what is the nucleus, I define the nucleus. So why this particular hypothalamus have the ability to produce the hormones? These are the parts we discuss. Right, everyone? Okay. Now what we are going to discuss, what are the hormones produced by the hypothalamus? Okay, we can look into the hypothalamic hormones. So this is symbolic diagram. All right. So hypothalamus contain many nucleus. All right. So listen, everyone. If you're looking the hypothalamus is connected with the anterior and the posterior pituitary. I already said about it. Now, if you look onto the hypothalamus, Hypothalamus basically will produce two kinds of hormones. One is called releasing hormone. Another one is called inhibiting hormones. Right? Releasing hormone is having stimulatory action, and inhibitory hormone is having inhibitory action. Now we can look into which are the main releasing hormones from the hypothalamus. The first one is, so first I will tell the hormones into the anterior pituitary. This is also symbolic. Right? Into the anterior pituitary. Right? So listen everyone. This is for anterior pituitary. The first releasing hormone from the anterior pituitary is this hormone, we call it as, listen, this hormone is, the first one we are discussing is thyrotropin releasing hormone. Thyrotropin releasing hormone. It's otherwise known as TRH. What is that called? TRH. It will come into the anterior pituitary. In the anterior pituitary, there is a cell. There is a cell, and that cell we call it as, this cell we call it as thyrotropes. From the thyrotropes, what will be released out? This thyrotropes will release the TSH. TSH means thyroid stimulating hormone. So let me write it down. TRH will stimulate thyrotropes in anterior pituitary. It's a cell and produce TSH. TSH means what? Thyroid stimulating hormone. Clear? Understood that? So the first releasing hormone we discuss what cell it will get stimulated. That also we discuss thyrotropes, and it will produce a hormone called TSH. Now the next releasing hormone is, listen, the second one we call it as GnRH. What is the GnRH? Gonadotropin releasing hormone. They will release from the hypothalamus and will come into the anterior pituitary. There they will stimulate. What they will stimulate? This GnRH. GnRH will stimulate gonadotrophs. If the gonadotrophs get really stimulated by this GnRH, okay, what they will release? They will release gonadotropins. What they will release? Gonadotropins. What are the gonadotropins? FSH and the LH. What is the FSH? Follicular stimulating hormone. And luteinizing hormone. Clear? Now, the next releasing hormone is the GnRH is over. The next one is the third one, that is growth releasing hormone. Growth releasing hormone. So growth releasing hormone, otherwise you can write it as GRH. They will stimulate what? This growth. So you can see that what is we call for that? It's called GRH, growth releasing hormone. What cells will be stimulated by that? They will stimulate the somatotrophs. So this cells we call it as somatotrophs. Right? They will stimulate somatotrophs. So somatotrophs, why we call it as somatotrophs? Because they will produce the somatotropins. Somatotropins, otherwise called it as GH, growth hormone. Clear? It's otherwise known as growth hormone. So why the term somatotropins or the somatotrophs? Because growth hormone will help for somatic parts grow. Somatic part of the body, if you want to grow up, we require this growth hormone. That's why we call them as somatotrophs or somatotropins. Somatotropin only or growth hormone. The cells will produce the somatotropins. We call it as somatotrophs. Okay. Now the next one is the next releasing hormone. Number 4. The next releasing hormone is corticotropic releasing hormone. So it's otherwise known as CRH. This corticotropic releasing hormone, they will stimulate the cells present in the anterior pituitary. What is that called? Corticotropic releasing hormone, where they will stimulate corticotrophs. And will produce, they will produce, what they will produce? They will produce the hormone called ACTH. So adrenocorticotropic hormone. Adrenocorticotropic hormone. Clear? So fourth one is also we discussed corticotropic releasing hormone. It's a stimulate the corticotropes and they will produce this ACTH. Now moving on to the next. They will the next one it's called PRL, that is prolactin releasing hormone. They will stimulate what they will stimulate. They will stimulate the what is this cell called? This cell we call it as lactotropes. Lactotropes, what they will release? Lactotropes will release prolactin. So listen, prolactin releasing hormone, they will stimulate the cells called lactotropes. Lactotropes will release or secrete prolactin. Okay? It's clear, very clear. Now the next one is into the anti-deficiency. Remember, the next releasing hormone it is called the sixth one. This one we call it as melanocyte stimulating releasing hormone. So let me write it down. This nuclei they will produce what? The releasing hormone name it is called melanocyte stimulating releasing hormone. So this is called MSR. So they will stimulate the production of what hormone? They will stimulate the production of MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone. So they will stimulate the hormonal production of MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone. Okay. These are the releasing hormones from the hypothalamus. Sure. So let me tell you all the things. We started from the thyrotropic releasing hormone, then gonadotropic releasing hormone, growth releasing hormone, then corticotropic releasing hormone, prolactin releasing hormone, and the melanocyte stimulating releasing hormone. These are the main releasing hormones from the hypothalamus into the anterior pituitary. So as they are stimulatory in effect, you can show them with plus mark. Right? But at the same time, remember, I told you in the beginning, the hypothalamus will also produce the inhibiting hormones. So one thing you have to remember here, If you take the growth hormone, if you take the growth hormones, inhibitory hormone, growth hormones, inhibitory hormone will be produced from the hypothalamus. So this is somatotrophs. So somatotrophs, the growth releasing hormone will give the stimulatory effect, but there is another hormone, they will give the negative effect. That means inhibitory effect. This growth hormone, inhibitory hormone produced from the hypothalamus so growth hormone, inhibiting hormone produced from the hypothalamus, we call it as, that's why I marked it minus mark, we call them as somatostatin. Right? What we call for that? Somatostatin. Growth hormone, inhibitory hormone from the hypothalamus. What we call for that? We call them as somatostatin. So they will make the inhibitory effect on somatotrophs. Instead of making the stimulation, they will do the inhibitory effect on somatotrophs. So the growth hormone release will decrease. Clear? Now, similar to that, if you take this prolactin releasing hormones, they will stimulate the lactotrophs. But there are some hypothalamic hormones. They have the inhibitory effect on. They have the inhibitory effect on lactotrophs. So I will show with minus mark. Right? That inhibitory effect into the lactotrophs. So against which hormone? Against the prolactin. So prolactin inhibiting hormone. This prolactin inhibitory hormone is nothing but it is our dopamine. Right? So here two areas you can see the minus mark. This minus mark indicates here it is somatostatin. I written here. They will inhibit the somatotrophs. I written very clearly here. Then prolactin inhibitory hormone, that is dopamine. Dopamine only I shown here. They will inhibit the action of this lactotrophs. Yep. Everybody understood? This much is very clear. So we have seen the connection of what we so far seen it, the connection of anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus. So the hormones will be synthesized in the hypothalamus. They will make the stimulatory effect and the inhibitory effect also in the anterior pituitary. If it is making the stimulatory effect, that kind of hormones we call it as releasing hormone. If they are making the inhibitory effect, that hormones we call it as inhibiting hormones. The releasing hormones name we have seen already, and the two inhibitory hormones name also we have seen it. The prolactin inhibitory hormone and also the growth inhibitory hormone. The growth inhibitory hormone we call it as somatostatin, and the prolactin inhibitory hormone we call it as the dopamine. Clear? So it's very clear. Now, let me go into the next part. So it's very clear here. This is thyroid box. Right. Let me draw the one more diagram. So listen. So first, what we have learned, the connection between the hypothalamus. So this is hypothalamus epithelium. This is hypothalamus. This is anterior. So we see the connections. Now let me draw the symbolic diagram again. Right. Right. So this is hypothalamus. This is anterior. The question we have to ask here is hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary, how they are connected. So if you look on to the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary connections, it will be connected by so many capillaries. They will be connected by so many capillaries. Okay, and see that through this only the hormones will be passed on. So you can see that in the anterior pituitary they will start as capillaries. Here also they will end as capillaries. So in the blood circulatory system, a system is starting with the capillaries and the ending also with the capillaries. Then you can call it as it's a portal circulation. What you can call for that? It's a portal circulation. Right? Or else we call it as portal vein circulation. Right? So the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary connection is by blood vessels. Here blood vessel means capillaries. Here both sides it is capillary is the beginning and the ending part is capillaries. We call it as portal vein circulation. So that generally anterior pituitary we call it as adenohypophysis. Adenohypophysis. Right? That's clear. Now this is anterior pituitary and this is hypothalamus. Now look on to the next one. I would like to draw here. This is hypothalamus, anterior pituitary already I discussed, so I'm not touching that. The posterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary, if you're looking, so I told you that this nucleus are the cell bodies only. So cell bodies means they will be the dendrites and they will be the axon. This axonal terminal will be there inside the posterior pituitary. So the hypothalamus contains the nucleus. This nucleus is connected with the posterior pituitary by an axon, and this axonal terminal in the posterior pituitary. Axonal terminal will be in the posterior pituitary. Right? Clear, everyone? So this is the nucleus. This nucleus will be connected with the hypothalamus by an axon. It is not similar to the capillaries in the case of the anterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary are connected by the nerves with the hypothalamus. Clear? It's very clear. So listen, everyone. Hypothalamus, this is posterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary and the hypothalamus, they are connected by axons. And you can see that. Remember, the point is very clear. Make it very clear. Hypothalamic pituitary, the hypothalamic posterior pituitary connection is by a nerve. So that's why posterior pituitary generally we call it as neurohypophysis. So here we have learned that is adenohypophysis. Here it is neurohypophysis because they are connected by the nerves. So now listen to the next point. That important difference we have to understand here with the anterior and the posterior pituitary. Here, the hormones will be synthesized in the cell bodies. Okay, and through this axon, it will be just released into the axonal terminal. And whenever required from this axonal terminal, the hormones will be released into the blood circulation. Am I right? But this axonal terminal, where it's located, this axonal terminal is located in the posterior pituitary. Am I right? So that means posterior pituitary is not synthesizing the hormone. Posterior pituitary just storing and accumulating the hormones. The reason behind it, the axonal terminal of this nuclei is placed inside this posterior pituitary so that the posterior pituitary actually not synthesizing any hormone. They are just storing the hormones. It's because the axonal terminal of this nuclei are located in the posterior pituitary. That's the simple. Clear? So the question can be asked: who will synthesize the posterior pituitary hormones? Answer is hypothalamus, not the posterior pituitary. Clear? Everybody understood? So posterior pituitary, if you are looking, they will release or they contain two kinds of hormones. The one is called oxytocin. Other one we call it as vasopressin or ADH. Antidiuretic hormone. Right? So posterior pituitary, they will produce the hormones, oxytocin and the vasopressin. Vasopressin, otherwise it is called as antidiuretic hormone. So I hope it's very clear these two things, right? Now, what we have to learn, the next. The one more thing we have to understand. So all of you look into this guy. So this is hypothalamus. This is anterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary, if you look at, there is two regions in the anterior pituitary. The regions in the anterior pituitary. Two regions in the anterior pituitary. The one we call it as pars distalis. The other one we call it as pars intermedia. So remember, everyone, that point is remember, it should be very important inside your mind because pars distalis only will produce the PSH, then gonadotropins, FSH, LH, then this growth hormone, then prolactin, then the TSH, gonadotropin releasing hormone, that is the gonadotropins, the FSH, LH, GH, prolactin, everything will be produced by the ACTH, everything will be produced by or produced from this pars distalis region. But the pars intermediate region only will produce this MSH. That's the importance of that. So I hope it's clear. So from the pars intermediate region only, the MSH will be get produced or will be released. Clear? So anterior pituitary contains the two regions. One is called pars distalis. Majority of the hormones will be released from there. The one exception, the pars distalis region, they only, sorry, pars intermediate region, they will produce only this MSH. That's one exception to the pars distalis. Clear? Everybody understood that much? Very clear. Now, if you understand that, the next thing you may have to clear, we have to take the each hormone. That's a part next. We'll start with the thyroid releasing hormone. Okay. So we'll start with the thyroid gland. That's the first big gland we are going to discuss. You know that thyroid gland is anterior to the neck. Right. So let me draw the diagram. The trachea you can observe here. So superior to that, you can observe the larynx. Now, you know that inside the thyroid gland, if you are checking, the thyroid gland contains thyroid follicles. Okay? Thyroid gland contains thyroid follicles.
And you can see that. So many thyroid follicles will be inside of it. Okay. So many thyroid follicles. Right. And also you can see that the two lobes of the thyroid, they are connected each other by a connective tissue, and it's called isthmus. Thyroid lobes are connected by a connective tissue called isthmus. Now, if you open the thyroid follicles, you can see that I'm just drawing the histology of thyroid follicle. Right. So, listen everyone. This is the thyroid follicles. Right. Right. Now, inside of it, inside the spot surrounding this thyroid follicle, you can observe a fluid. Right. Here also you can see that this fluid, this black thing I have denoted, that is called thyroid follicles. Surrounding to the thyroid follicle, you can observe a fluid part, and this is called colloid. What is this called? This is called colloid. It's clear. Okay, everybody understood this? Now, what is the importance of this colloid? You have to clearly understand. Let me come to that one. So listen, everybody. I would like to bring the concept again here. Hypothalamus, anti-pituitary. I would like to talk about the thyroid gland, so I should definitely talk about PRH. So this is PRH. The nuclei, they will release the PRH. PRH will come into the anterior pituitary, and PRH, this is PRH. PRH will stimulate the thyrotrophs, and that will produce the TSH. This TSH, this TSH, listen, this TSH, they will come into the thyroid gland. And they will endorse into the thyroid gland, then into the thyroid follicles. So this TSH, they will stimulate this thyroid follicles to produce the thyroid hormones, that is T3 and T4. So listen, everybody listen. The TRH is coming from the hypothalamus. They will stimulate the thyrotrophs here. Thyrotrophs will stimulate the secretion of TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. that stimulate the thyroid follicles. Thyroid follicles will start to produce T3 and the T4. T3 we call it as triiodothyronine. T4 we call it as tetraiodothyronine. Or else we call it as thyroxine. T3, most of the time, please understand, let me tell that one point very clearly. T4 always will be converted to the active form, that is T3. T4 is not very active form. So most of the tetraiodothyronine or the thyroxine formed up, they will be converted to T3. Clear? Everybody understood that? Now, if the thyroid follicles, if the thyroid gland or the thyroid follicles, if they want to produce this T3 and the T4 hormone, it is, they require the raw material. The raw material here it is iodine. Without the iodine, we cannot synthesize the T3 and T4. That's why iodine deficiency will lead into the thyroid hormonal deficiency also. Am I right? Everybody understood? So iodine deficiency can be lead into the thyroid hormonal deficiency. The reason behind it is if you want to synthesize the thyroid hormones, they are T3 and the T4, we require this iodine. That we will get it from our food. It's very popular. We are using the iodized salt. To avoid the thyroid related problems only, we are using the iodized salt. But how it will be possible? We have to clearly understand. Listen, everyone. Actually, the iodine will be taken into this colloid. Okay. Then, the another one more raw material we'll use here it is tyrosine, the amino acid. Okay. The tyrosine, the amino acid. Then another one more protein also present here in the colloid region, and that is known as thyroglobulin. So listen, everybody listen. With the help of raw materials, that is iodine, and the amino acid, the next raw material is the amino acid that is called tyrosine. With these two raw materials, inside the colloid, with the help of this thyroglobulin protein, will synthesize the T3 and T4 hormones. Then, after that, these hormones will be transferred to the thyroid follicles. These hormones will be transferred into the thyroid follicles, then into the blood circulation whenever it requires. Clear? Everybody understood? So let me talk about it. So what are the raw materials we require? Iodine and the tyrosine. With the help of that, we synthesize this particular two hormones, T3 and T4. And what is the protein we require inside the colloid for the synthesis part? It's called thyroglobulin. After that, where they will be get transferred, they will be transferred into the thyroid follicles. From the thyroid follicles, it will be released into the blood circulation. So that means one question I always will ask it, which is the hormone they will be stored in the extracellular space before it release. The answer is thyroid hormones. Because you know that in the colloid region, they will be stored for some time. After that, only it will reach into the thyroid follicle. Then from the thyroid follicle, it will release into the blood. Because most of the other hormones, if you are considering, it will be directly from the cells it is. But in the case of thyroid hormones, first it is synthesized inside the colloid, then into the cell, then into the blood. So that's the reason it will be it will be stored for extracellular space for some time. After that, only it will be released into the blood circulation. Clear? Absolutely. And also remember, thyroxine is the less active form, so most of the thyroxine will be converted to T3. Clear, everyone? This much. Now, what we are going to learn, it's applied physiology part. What are the applied physiology related to the thyroid gland? So listen, the hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism. Okay. Then we also have to discuss the autoimmune disorders related with thyroid gland. Right? So listen, before we discuss this applied physiology part, we have to really understand what are the functions of this thyroid hormones. Functions of thyroid hormone. So thyroid hormones is having many functions. One of the main functions, they are very important for our metabolism, the brain development, growth. Okay. Then sexual libido. Then gonads development. Neuronal development. Right. It also influences the blood cell production. Right. So metabolism, brain development, then the growth, sexual libido, gonads development, neuronal development, and the blood cell production. They will help in these all matters. So that means almost every functions in our body that will be controlled by this thyroid hormone. So that its deficiency or its abnormalities, it will almost influence every systems in our body from the head to foot. Right. So one important point I want to tell here. This thyroid hormones, if you are looking, they will increase the metabolism of the cells. As they are increasing the metabolism, by the byproduct of the metabolism it is, cell metabolism it is, one byproduct is, or the one condition it is, the heat, the body temperature will increase. The heat production will be more. So heat always we will calculate in the caloric value. So as they are producing the heat and the heat will be calculating in the caloric value, we call this thyroid hormone as calorigenic. We call them as calorigenic hormone. That's clear. So this hormone commonly we call it as calorigenic hormone. You only will produce this heat. Now, moving on to the hypothyroidism and the hyperthyroidism, please understand. So it's very simple. From the word meaning itself, you can understand the hypothyroidism. What is hypothyroidism? Decreased thyroid hormones. That's simple. So, what are problems will happen to the patient? We already discussed. Patient will have the decreased metabolism. Decreased metabolism means the what of the food we are taking that may not be metabolized, that cannot be utilized. So patient may get the obesity. I also told about the patient with mental health, the brain health, neuronal system, everything will be controlled by this thyroid hormones. So patient will be very inactive, or we can call it as lethargic. So in the case of females, menstrual disorders, right? So if it is severely hypothyroidism, it can cause the infertility, right? So some people they mentally they will be have the disorientation, right? So these are the some symptoms of the thyroid hormones. But the point you have to remember here very clearly. I told this already. Listen up. This is hypothalamus. From the hypothalamus, TRH will stimulate the thyrotropes and they will produce the TSH. TSH will come into the thyroid gland and they will stimulate the production of T3 and T4. Right? Now understand, everybody please understand this. Listen that point. So it's very clear. First, TRH will be come from the hypothalamus that will stimulate the TSH. TSH will stimulate the production of T3 and T4. So a patient coming with hypothyroidism, if you are checking the blood level, especially the T3, T4 and TSH, you will see one thing very clearly. The patient with hypothyroidism, if you check their blood initially, the TSH value will be very high. What is the reason? That point only I'm going to say. Because in our body, hormonal systems, most of the hormone systems are controlled by negative feedback mechanism. How they are controlled are negative feedback mechanism. Okay, let me write it. Most of our hormones are controlled by negative feedback mechanism. What is the negative feedback mechanism? When one hormone increases, other hormone will decrease. When one hormone decreases, another hormone will increase. This is called negative feedback. Almost 99% hormonal actions are negative feedback mechanism. I'll talk about the 1%, the positive feedback mechanism later. But let me make it very clear what is the negative feedback mechanism. When the one hormone increases, connecting or relate to that hormone, another hormone will relate to that. One more hormone will be there, that hormone will decrease. If that hormone level is decreased, another hormone will increase. So let me talk about it with respect to this thyroid hormones. So hypothyroidism comes up, what will happen? T3 and T4 decrease. So automatically it will stimulate TRH more, so TRH will increase. So if the TRH is more, TSH will increase. So if the TSH is increased, T3 and the T4 become more. So this is the way body will try to balance it at the time when they decrease the thyroid hormones. So that's why I told it, when you check this blood with the blood of this hypothyroidic patient, the TSH value will be very, very high. That point you may have to remember. Clear? Now, moving on to the next one, that is the hyperthyroidism. So listen everyone. So the next one is hyperthyroidism. So during the time of hyperthyroidism, T3 and the T4 will be very high. So what all things will be happen here? Instead of the obesity, what will be happen? Patient become very lean, increase appetite. Okay. Then you can see that menstrual disorder still will be there. Right. Patient will be hyperactive. Okay. These are some disorders or some problems you may can see in the case of hyperthyroidism. Now coming into this uh, hyperthyroidism and the hypothyroidism, we have to discuss a little more about it. Some other disorders relate to that. So if you look at in the case of pregnant woman, just imagine pregnant woman, she got the iodine deficiency. If she got the iodine deficiency, and she may get the hypothyroidism. If she got the hypothyroidism, the baby also get the severe hypothyroidism. And if the baby got the severe hypothyroidism, and that kind or that situation or that condition, we call it as cretinism. So just imagine, because of the iodine deficiency, the pregnant mother got the hypothyroidism. This hypothyroidism, if it persists and progress for a long time during the time of pregnancy, that means it also can get into the child, this hypothyroidism. And that condition we call it as the cretinism. Cretinism means, remember, cretinic child will be the mentally retarded. They will be have the growth retardation. Growth retardation. Sometimes they will be deaf. They will be deaf and mute. So many other problems. So cretinism, please understand the word meaning of that, it is Christ-like. So these children will be mentally retarded. They will be so innocent. That's why we call them as cretinic, the Christ-like. So mentally retarded, growth retardation, and sometimes they will be deaf and mute. That is also clear. Now, the little more things we have to discuss, the applied part. The autoimmune disorders relate with the thyroid. The one autoimmune disorder only we call it as Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is an autoimmune disorder, same time it's a hypothyroid condition. hypothyroid condition. The one more autoimmune disorder that is we have to learn it. It's called Graves' disease. But Graves' disease is not hypo, it's a hyperthyroid condition. Yeah. So in the Graves' disease, because of this antibodies, they will cause the inflammations in the eye orbit so that our eyeball will get projected out. So this said, in the Graves' disease, it's an autoimmune hyperthyroid condition. In that disease, the eyeball, they are situated inside the orbital. In that orbital region and the eyeball region, some kind of inflammations will happen sometimes because of this Graves' disease, so that the eyeball will get projected out. And that condition, we call it as exophthalmos. What is that called? Exophthalmos. Right? It's called exophthalmos. That is also clear to me. So now also it's not finished. We have to discuss a little more about it. Two more points. Now the one thing it is goiter. What is a goiter? Goiter is, you can see that enlargement of the thyroid gland. So how does that happen? So goiter basically it's a hypothyroid condition. Now listen, it's a hypothyroid condition. When the hypothyroidism comes up, I told you that the T3 and the T4 will decrease. So what will happen? It will increase the TRH. It will increase the TSH. When the TSH increases, listen very carefully. That's very important. When the TSH start to increase, they will start to produce more T3 and T4. Who? Thyroid follicles. But at the same time, remember, this thyroid follicles size will increase when the TSH act more. The size will increase, thyroid follicle size will increase, also the number will increase. So then overall, if the size of the thyroid follicle increases, what will happen? Overall size of the thyroid gland also will increase. So that patient will have the enlargement of the thyroid gland. Here. So this thyroid gland enlargement is the after product of the negative feedback mechanism. Because this increased TSH will increase the size of the thyroid follicles and increase the number of the thyroid follicles. Still, generally we call a term for that. It's called hyperplasia of thyroid follicles. Clear? What is called for that? Hyperplasia of the thyroid follicle. Clear, everyone? Now, one more applied physiology. That's the last and finally the thyroid gland. It's nothing but myxedema. What is a myxedema? It is a severe hypothyroidism in adult. So why the term edema, mixed edema? Because just imagine a patient with mixed edema, their skin will be deposited with mucopolysaccharides. Mucopolysaccharides. Mucopolysaccharides, if it is too much, they will retain the water. So that will become as edema. So that's why we call it as mixed edema. So in the mixed edema, it's very common. Patient will be have this small edemas. Why this is happening? Because this mucopolysaccharide deposition will be happen just beneath the skin. So they will retain the water. Right? I think that's also clear. No confusion in this. So that's all regarding the thyroid gland. Now we can move on to the next. Now the next thing we have to look into. So everybody understand? The next point we have to understand about the growth hormone. So listen, the very first point you have to make it very clear inside your mind. Growth hormone have no action during the embryological period or the fetal period. Our growth during the fetal period or the embryological period is never controlled by growth hormone. For that, we have the human placental lactogen, and that we learn it in the human reproduction. But this point is really important. Embryological period or the fetal period, growth hormone does not have any role. Remember that. During fetal period or embryological period, growth hormone have no role in growth. Right? I think it's very clear. Now, I already told many other points. If you take this growth hormone, how can we increase the growth hormone? Growth hormone will increase many occasions or many situations. If you get a good sleep, the growth hormone will increase. If you do the good exercise, growth hormone will increase. If you do the fasting, that time also the growth hormone will increase. So number 1, 2, 3. These all situations, the sound sleep, good exercise, and the fasting will increase the growth hormone. Right? So what is the function of this growth hormone? What is a good thing in our body? Functions of growth hormone. They are, the growth hormone will help for lipolysis. Increase lipolysis. That's very important. They will increase the linear height of the person. Right? So they will help for the lipolysis and they will increase the linear height of the person. And also please remember, always remember, if you take the bone is having actually 3 parts. This is called epiphysis. Right. This is called epiphyseal plate. This is called, this region is called metaphysis, and this shaft region we call it as diaphysis. So listen at me. So actually, when we are in the growing age, the height increasing age, during that time our epiphyseal plate will be opened up. So when a person height getting increased, this epiphyseal plate will be keep on open. But when a person enters into the puberty, after some time, after some years, their testosterone level will increase. There will be a peak in the testosterone level. During that time, in the case of males, this epiphyseal plate will be closed up. So no more height increase. No more height increase. Similar to that, in the case of females, the estrogen will increase after the puberty, after some years. Similar to the testosterone, epiphyseal plate will be closed by this estrogen, so no more height. Clear, everyone? So listen, growth hormone, they will increase the height of the person, linear height of the person, we discussed. How they will do it? They won't allow the epiphyseal plate to close down. But after some years of this puberty, in the case of males, testosterone level will increase a lot. If the testosterone increases, they will bring the condition of epiphyseal plate will be closed down. By that, no more height increase. This similar action will be happening inside the females with the help of estrogen. It's clear, everybody? Now, the applied part. If the abnormal increase in the growth hormone, abnormal increase in growth hormone before epiphyseal closure, before epiphyseal closure, then it will lead into the a lot of height increase. The person will be gigantic. So we call the condition gigantism. But if the abnormal growth hormone increase happen after the epiphyseal closure, after the epiphyseal closure, and that condition we call it as acromegaly. What is that condition called? Acromegaly. So acromegaly persons, once the epiphyseal plate is closed up, we cannot further increase the height. It's not possible. But what will happen? Persons, this peripheral bonds will get deformed like that. It will be projected outward. The peripheral bonds will get deformed. That's what happening in the case of acromegaly. Peripheral bonds deform, like jaw bond or the limb bonds. they will get deformed. Clear? It's clear to everyone? No confusion there also. Now, now we have discussed if the growth hormone increase the applied physiology. But if the growth hormone decrease, that will lead into another condition. That time it's called dwarfism. So growth hormone decrease condition is called dwarfism. But remember, there are two types of dwarfism. Only growth hormone decrease, we call it as pituitary dwarfism. If the, what we call for that, pituitary dwarfism, remember, if the growth hormone decreased growth hormone happened by the decreased TSH and the TRH, because they are connected. TSH and the TRH always will stimulate the production of growth hormone. So growth hormone decrease can be happen by decreased TSH and the decreased TRH. That condition, the dwarfism, we call it as thyroid dwarfism. Remember, thyroid dwarfism is much more dangerous than the pituitary dwarfism. The reason is very simple. Because thyroid dwarfism, 99.9% patients will be mentally retarded. Right? That's very important. So pituitary dwarfism and the thyroid dwarfism, both are dwarfism only, but remember, pituitary dwarfism, mental retardation is very rare. But the thyroid dwarfism, mental retardation is very common. That's the one thing you may have to remember. Clear? That's the applied part in the case of growth hormone. That's clear. Now, so now we can move on to the next one. The next gland we are discussing it is the next hormone we are discussing. It is prolactin. Right. So I think you are remembering that prolactin will be first stimulated by prolactin releasing hormone, PRL. That will stimulate the lactotrophs. So lactotrophs will produce this prolactin. Right. Now, what is the use of the prolactin? Prolactin will increase the size of the mammary gland. They will increase the, so this is a mammary gland. What is the function of this mammary gland? You know that this mammary gland only, uh, the mothers do that only. The mothers will give this milk. The milk is synthesizing there only. The milk will be ejected from there only. So it's very important for the breastfeeding purpose. It's very important. So especially during the early childhood, the most preferable food is breastfeed. So that's why it's very important. So if one mother want to lactate, want to breastfeed, the mammary gland should be get enlarged up. This mammary gland enlargement, mammary gland enlargement will happen with the help of this prolactin. Then it also, this prolactin also will help for milk synthesis. Right? It also will give the milk synthesis. The initial months of the delivery, once the baby born, during that time, the first 6 months, prolactin level, if a mother she's keep on breastfeed the baby, her prolactin level will be very high. So listen everyone. A mother, she delivered the baby. After that, if she is breastfeeding regularly, her prolactin level will be very high up to the 6 to 7 months after that delivery. So what is the one advantage if the prolactin level is increased in the mother's body? Prolactin level increase, that will cause a negative feedback, mechanism on what? Gonadotropin releasing hormone, that is GnRH. If the GnRH decrease, that will decrease what? It will decrease the LH and the FSH. If the LH and the FSH decrease, no ovulation and no menstrual cycle. Right? No ovulation, no menstrual cycle means no more pregnancy. No pregnancy. That means when the PRL level, if it is very good in the mother's body during that time, if she got for the sexual intercourse also, she will not get pregnant because of this prolactin, the LH and the FSH level will be decreased. So that no ovulation, no menstrual cycle, no pregnancy. So this increased prolactin level will act as natural contraceptives. Right? But its effect will be only up to the 6 month to 7 month. It can be extended sometimes, but naturally in the general population, we will say it is from 6 month to 7 month from the delivery, from the date of delivery. Clear that point also? Right. So a mother, if she is lactating very much, she will achieve the contraceptive effect. So she will lactate. If she is lactating more prolactin will be produced. So there is no menstrual cycle, no ovulation. So as she is lactating and achieving this no menstruation, we call it as lactational amenorrhea. The simple meaning of it, by the lactation, by the lactation, there is no menstrual cycle. That's a simple meaning of it. So we call them as lactational amenorrhea. It's a natural contraceptive method. And also remember one point, who is the prolactin inhibitory hormone? It's called dopamine. Remember that point. Right? I think this much points are very clear. Now, Also, please remember, now we have discussed so many anterior pituitary hormones, but also please remember, we have to discuss the posterior pituitary hormones also. So, two posterior pituitary hormones, one is called oxytocin, another one is called vasopressin. So, this is right. This is hypothalamus. So, here is the nucleus. So, from this nucleus, the axons are coming. The axons are the axonal terminal here, right? So, here is also the axonal terminal, right? So, in this axonal terminal, remember, it will be oxytocin will be synthesized here. The vasopressin also will be synthesized here. We have already discussed about it, that's why I'm not going in detail. So after that, it will be stored in this axonal terminal. This axonal terminal is present in the posterior. Yeah. Now, what are the functions of this vasopressin or the antidiuretic hormone? This vasopressin or the antidiuretic hormone also you can call it as ADH. They mainly act in the collecting duct of the nephrons, right? And what they will do, they will increase the sodium and water reabsorption. So that's why we call them as anti-diuretic, because they will avoid or they will prevent the diuresis. Diuresis means increased loss of water and the sodium or the solutes through the urine. That will be prevented by this ADH or the vasopressin. That's why we call them as anti-diuretic hormone. The ADH we call it as anti-diuretic hormone. Now, please understand, while we coming on to the oxytocin main function it's a milk ejection hormone. Right, we also discussed mammary gland, if you want to synthesize the milk, we require the prolactin, but that milk want to come out from this nipple, that is called milk ejection. There we require oxytocin. Yeah. That's why we call them as milk ejection hormone. Okay, and this also will cause uterine contractions, uterine contractions during the delivery time or the parturition. All right. So remember that point also very clear. So we discussed about the oxytocin and the vasopressin also. Vasopressin or the ADH, they will help for the sodium and the water reabsorption, and the oxytocin they known as milk ejection hormone, and it also will cause for the uterine contraction during the parturition process. Okay, that's also clear. So many other hormones are there. Actually, we cannot discuss all the hormones within this time. The adrenal medullary hormones are there. Adrenal cortex hormones are there. Many other hormones it's there actually. But most of the other hormones we cannot discuss at this moment. That we will discuss in the other chapters, especially in the human reproduction while we will discuss. Now, what we are going to learn next is how the hormonal actions will come. So listen everyone. Here the point you have to remember. If you look on to the composition of the hormones, they are not very same. For example, if you take the our hormones like insulin, glucagon, okay, then if you consider the oxytocin, all right, then vasopressin, then if you take the growth hormone, all these hormones are made up of proteins only, or some are with the peptides. There may be the oligopeptides or the polypeptides. Okay, the oxytocin and the vasopressin are oligopeptides only, the rest all are polypeptides. Now, if you take the another one more hormone from the adrenal medulla, its name is called the adrenal medullary hormone only, epinephrine. This epinephrine, if you are taking, they are made up of amino acids. The amino acids are phenylalanine, that is the one of the main amino acids will be utilized there. Then coming into the next one, the estrogen, then cortisol, the thyroid, this adrenal cortical hormone, then testosterone, progesterone. These hormones you consider, they are made up of lipids, right? It's very clear. So almost every hormones, their composition, if you are taking, it's different. So you just consider this is a cell. A cell want to get the hormonal action. Okay, they want to get the hormonal action. How that will be possible? Because if you consider the lipid made hormones, they can go inside the cell and can make the actions. But other cells, other hormones that is made up of amino acids and the proteins, they cannot enter into the cell membrane because they are made up of biphospholipid membrane. So they cannot enter. So lipid hormones, they can enter, but the protein hormones, they cannot enter. Here comes the man, the very important concept. So what is the concept here? You take any cell, they are double membrane, biphospholipid. Supposed to be, if it is a protein hormones like insulin or glucagon, outside the cell membrane, there will be a receptor present. Into that, this hormone will bind. This receptors for the hormonal action outside the cell membrane, we call it as extracellular receptors. But lipid hormones, their receptors will be inside. Most of the time, it will be inside the nucleus. So we call them as intracellular receptors. So it's very clear. So a hormonal action, if you want to do it, the first requirement is the hormone, no doubt. Second requirement is receptor. Receptors basically composed with proteins only, but they can pass the information what they are getting. It is just like a transferring the information. It is just like a transaction. So whatever when the hormone bind with the receptors, they will pass certain message to the next level systems. That is what happening in the hormonal action. And I also told you that if the hormone, if it is made up of proteins or the peptides or the oligopeptides or the polypeptides, the receptor will be outside the cell. We call them as extracellular receptors. And if the hormone is made up of lipid, their receptors will be intracellular. We call them as intracellular receptors. Okay, it's clear. Right. So now we can move on to the last part of this lecture. Right. Supposed to be, you just imagine a hormone, insulin want to enter. Where the receptor will be? They will be have the extracellular receptor. Into this extracellular receptor, this insulin will bind. So what will happen? When the insulin bind with this extracellular receptors, by that action, some messengers will be produced. These messengers, commonly we call it as second messengers, because hormone is the first messenger. So we call the second one, we call it as second messengers. Commonly, the second messengers, there are different things will act as the second messengers. Mainly, they are calcium ions will act as the second messengers. The IP3, that is called inositol triphosphate. Or one more messenger only, the cyclic AMP. It's called cyclic AMP. AMP means adenosine monophosphate. So what the second messengers will do? This inositol, IP3, and the cyclic AMP. They will cause gene expressions. When the gene expression comes up, the mRNA will be get stimulated. mRNA will do the protein synthesis. That's simple. It's a very complex mechanism, but this is the way we can explain that. So if the material cannot pass through the cell membrane, they will utilize this extracellular receptors. But and after that, they will cause this many actions. But any material, any hormone, if they can pass through the cell membrane, their receptors will be inside the nucleus. That time, what they will do? They will directly cause the gene expressions. Then, like that, mRNA synthesis, then protein synthesis. They don't require this second messenger, so they can directly do the gene expressions. That's a main difference of this uh, this steroid or this intracellular and the extracellular receptors. Those hormones having the intracellular receptors, they don't require this second message. And also remember one point here, I would like to add that one. If you consider the thyroid hormones, okay, thyroid hormones, their molecular weight is very, very small. So because of that, their receptors will be inside only, not outside. Clear? That one is really important. Even though they are made up of the many kind of glycoproteins and some other things combined inside, or the amino acids, but as they are very, very small, this thyroid hormones receptors will be inside. They have the intracellular receptors. Clear that point? So that's all regarding the hormonal actions. So the second messengers are really important concept. Then extracellular and the intracellular receptors. So these are the things we have to learn in this chapters. But we did not discuss about the insulin and the glucagon that already discussed in the digestion chapter. And also please remember about it. Many of the testis, the estrogen part and all that we will discuss in the this human reproduction will be discussing. That will be discussed. So only the major hormones, anterior hormone, anterior pituitary hormones only be discussed here, and the two major posterior pituitary hormones also be discussed. So remember, there are many hormones. Actually, it contains adrenal gland hormones or the adrenal medulla, adrenal cortex. That everything. When the time comes up, we will discuss. At this class, we will not get the time to discuss all the points. Okay, that's all today. So we finished the 11th standard, all the chapters we have finished from the zoology side. So thank you very much, all of you. Bye. Thank you.